What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to my ESO Guides video. My name is John, and in this video I'll be teaching you about the crafting system for beginners. So 2 years ago, when I first started playing this game, there were no guides on YouTube. I had to figure it out all by myself. It was about like part 50 of my Let's Play when I actually figured it out and things started clicking, and that's when I learned how to do it. So now there are actually a lot of guides on this, so I'm going to be teaching you the beginners basics on how to do everything. Whether you're a PC player or console player, this should help you out, though the UI may be a little bit different, but everything plays out the same way. So in here I'm going to show you everything first, and then we'll actually get into some examples and we'll show you how everything works. So we'll start off with all of these. I'll tell you what they do and how it can adapt to your play style depending on, what character you make, what you do. Essentially, you can max out everything, but what you should focus on first primarily, depending on what you start with. So Alchemy is one of those classes that you make potions with, and honestly, it's not that important. Maybe if you're doing PvP, but that's really all people use it for. And making potions, you can use a lot of different materials to create dual stat, tri-stat potions that give you health, stamina, magic, regen, and all that stuff. But for the most part, it's really easy to find unless you have a lot of time. I honestly don't think that it's too important to be making, unless you're a merchant and you can get the stuff you need, the regens or materials for cheap, and then you just vendor it off and then you just merchant to profit for it. Then that's a really good use for it. But otherwise, if you're just using it for self potions, you're going to be spending a lot more money and it's easier to just buy it. But overall, potions. Now, blacksmithing, clothing, and woodworking all play out the same way. However, blacksmithing is primarily used for armor that's heavy, medium, and they are all the same. It's just one is metalworking, one is clothing, and one is bows and staves and whatnot. So that's all there is to it. And then I think the most important one is primarily blacksmithing. It also is the most expensive one because the materials to craft things are, and right now, the most expensive in terms of the game market. So I'll get more into all of these a little bit later, but pretty much these are all the same. The keen eye is just when you're out in the world and you see an ore that something you mine, then it'll be easier to see. And essentially, if you're playing in HD, this really shouldn't be a problem, but it's not really something that's really important. You're better off putting it in something else. Clothing, it also works the same way. Now, the reason why you might use clothing is for light armor or medium. Now, they all work the same way. I'll show you how to do all this in a bit, but primarily, you see how there's mostly light and heavy, or light and medium armor. It's kind of for different play styles, essentially. So Enchanting, this is probably going to be the one that breaks your in-game bank and takes the longest to actually get to 50. Now, Enchanting is kind of complicated. I might separate that into a different video in more detail, but essentially what this is you see how there's 3 different ores. I'll actually just show you it right now. Where is it? Okay, you see these things? The squares, the green ones, and the circles. Yes, you use these 3 to combine it into one better one with a stat on it. And after that, it'll turn into a glyph, or yeah, a glyph, and you could essentially put that into your armor or weapons, and you see how it gives a enchantment. That's what the effect does for it, essentially. So that's what it is. I just kind of explained that briefly, but if you want me to go into more details for that in another video, just explaining it in a really long, complicated video, I can do that. But just essentially, if you're beginning this, all you really need to know is you need 3 of them: the circle, the square, and the triangle, and combine it and to make a glyph that has a stat, and you put that stat into your armor or weapon. Okay, next, provisioning. Provisioning is used for food and drinks. Essentially, the foods that you create are like extra buffs, and it goes into your consumables. Potions are alchemy, and provisioning is like foods and stuff you make. Now, the reason why you should probably max out your provisioning is they have daily writs. Well, they actually have daily writs for all of these, but provisioning actually gives the best rewards. But don't really worry about it too much if you're early game. It's just more for like late game. So you want to level these up, but it's not really the highest priority things. Obviously, you want to put your points into skills first. Then most of this stuff is just kind of if you have extra, or you really just like exploring and you have way too many skill points than you know what to do with, then well, honestly, I would put it into whatever, like blacksmithing, clothing, or woodworking, depending on which one you're playing as first. And then after, like, you get capped a little bit, like, you can't actually just put all 6 of them in at one point. They do have a level requirement. So, like, let's say for the first one, to get 1 of 6, you requires level 1. 2 of 6 requires, like, level 10 for provisioning. So, essentially, by 50, you'll get everything maxed out. So, don't, like, focus all in it. And then here, the chef and brewer thing is just you make 3 extra servings. So, essentially, if you have the materials to make 1, you get 4 instead. So, that's always good. And food is generally good because it gives extra stats that you put into here. For example, like if you wanted to increase your max health and max magicka and stamina for 2 hours, you want to make the food for that, and then it works just like a potion. So good to know, right? All right, next. And then woodworking, once again, is the same as like blacksmithing and clothing. This character particularly is primarily used for like melee and all that stuff. Woodworking is more focused on bows, staves, mages, and stuff. So I don't really have a need to put it in. I just kind of have it leveled just in case like friends need it, and I can make them stuff in case they want it. Plus at level 46 is generally the cap, where you can max out everything. If I really wanted to, I could put all the points into here. Right now, 46, I'm good to go. But I took out the points because I don't need it. So, now that you learned some of the basics, and keep in mind, I do know this is a lot of information you could learn in like 10 minutes. So, feel free to like favorite the video, or I don't know, save it. And just if you need help on anything, you're more than welcome to ask me a question, leave a comment, or just watch the video again. So, let's go over everything once more, and then we'll do some examples. Alchemy, potions, blacksmithing for more melee-based characters, or using stamina and like mostly heavy armor. That's what you would think of. And then sharp swords and all that stuff. Clothing is more medium armor based, and woodworking is light armor and staves, bows. Enchanting is for weapon and armor upgrades. Provisioning is food. So there are 3 different things you could do. Once you go to a smithy area, you'll see the icon where you see the 3 stations. Yeah. So there's one of them, the blacksmithing station, and then there's the clothing station right here. And then outside, I believe is, or no, not outside, just right here. This is what a woodworking station looks like. Since I'm primarily a blacksmithing person, I'll show you how to do this. So you see these. Let me go to one I actually have some materials to show you an example first. All right, so to refine the materials, you find these all over the world, or just doing questing. You get these in general. So you need 10 of anything, and then once you have 10 of them, you get to bring it into your refined materials, and you refine it. And then you get some leather out of it, right? So once you get the leather, you get to go to a selection or a page of just whatever you want. You can do a lot of stuff, deconstruct. I'll get into all of this in a little bit. So let's take a look at we have some thick leather. I guess we'll just use this as a example. Okay, so let's say we're going to want to create a medium full leather jack. This is what the thing we're going to be making is. And you see how it's in medium armor and then body plate, chest armor? Good. So let's say you're level 50 and you want a level 50 item. So this is the materials you're going to use first. So this is the only one we actually have right now, I believe, on me. So we're going to use it as a test. So the more you increase it, the level goes up, and then you'll see the stat bonus. And you can only go up to a certain point until you have to go up to the next tier. And then once you go up to the next tier, that's the materials you'll need for that. Well, actually, we have some veteran 9 and veteran 15 ones. But just for demonstration purposes, this really doesn't matter. I don't want to waste materials on useless stuff. So let's say we're level 44, right? And we want this piece of armor. So we use this, and then we go to our next step, which is the style. Now this one is kind of optional, but you still need something. Apparently, it should be like, if you don't want a certain style, you don't have to have it. It could be just like a plain piece. That's what I would do. Personally, if I was a game developer, I would just take out the style or make it completely optional. But, so yeah. Depending on like what you want, it'll tell you what style you need. So if you wanted an Imperial style, you can have that. If you wanted a Soul-Shriven style, you use the Plasm and Daedric. I personally think the Daedric styles looks the best, but those are also harder to come by. So we're just going to use an Orc style just to make this one. So this itself is just cosmetic. And then you can use a Mimic Stone. Essentially, those are like the Crown Store equivalent of cash. If you don't have that, use a Crown or Mimic Stone, and it replaces that, so you can make any style you want, technically. But I personally don't think it's a good choice. I'd rather just use in-game gold because it's cheaper. And then the trait, depending on what you want, you're gonna have to like do this on your own time and find out what is good for like whatever you're making. So over here, it shows you like what your second stat is or what it could be. Now keep in mind, you can't replace this one unless you make a completely new one. So like this is something to actually think about when you're crafting. So for this one, let's say we're a stamina based character and we need to use all stamina spells, and of course the cost of sprinting also requires stamina, so we want to add some of that to it. So after that, we can make our decision. Let's say this is what we want, okay? And then now we craft it. So now that we have our item with the stuff we need, we can either go to improvement if you're good with it, or you're not. So let's take a full leather jack. I'll just use this for demonstration purposes. We won't do it too high. So this is the later part of it that's a little bit more complex and risky. If you're a beginner, don't really worry about this. You shouldn't really be buying armor or anything until late game. But if you have the extra supplies, it's fine. So as you see here, our armor is white. That means it's like common status. When you use, these are the materials that you find just by exploring or playing the game normally. You can upgrade it into different colors. Now, it goes from green to blue to purple and then legendary. Obviously, legendary being the highest rated and most expensive, which we're not going to actually be doing. So every time you upgrade it, you have a chance to break the item if it misses. So let's say you only want to use one, you have 50%. If you want to use two, you have 100%. Now this also goes into play when you upgrade the skills. You have a higher chance of like gaining chance when you do that. So let me do something. We're in clothing right now. The stitching and all this stuff, it just makes everything easier to like craft and everything. So the higher your level is, essentially the higher chance you'll be able to make things. So we have a 100% chance we're using 2 of them, and then it'll make our armor from stat A or white to green with those stats, and then we just improve, and then you have it just gives you a warning essentially. And then now you could keep on doing this. As you may imagine, the chance gets lower and lower every time, so you have to use more materials every time to keep upgrading it to a higher stat bonus, which is what most late game players do. They just boost their weapon to legendary instantly, which is also really expensive because in the current meta, things kinda just making the materials costs like hundreds of thousands of gold just to make one item, and then you have to make an entire set of, like, I don't know, 10 items, so that's like millions of gold. But don't really worry about it. If you're just a beginner, you'll find items. When you should actually start looking for items is probably when you complete all 3 factions, and then you should just be good to go. But by Veteran 1, every time you go to like a certain area, let me just give you an example of one I memorized off the top of my head because I've been there. So the Rift, you see icons like this on the map. This is a place where you can craft, like, I would say, quote-unquote collector's editions of certain set items. So if you go to here or like over here, you just look at them and then you just find something. They make certain set items for all the classes, like whether you're light, medium, or heavy armor. It just does certain sets, so depending on your playstyle, you're gonna have to look at them or just look it up on Google. And that's pretty much all the beginner's idea of what you should know for crafting. Essentially, depending on your playstyle. So, in my opinion, if you're using blacksmithing, you're either using heavy or medium armor. Clothing is more for medium armor, and woodworking is light armor or bows, staffs, and then this for like weapons is axes, swords. You get that idea. And you know, so once you get those, you can start crafting. And then just to recap, once you have 10, you can refine it and get like a thingy for like the style, and then the sanded maple would be used for creation, to like create stuff and upgrade. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I might make a advanced tutorial for everyone, but this is just a beginner's guide. Hopefully you learned something. If you didn't, feel free to leave it in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer questions you may have. And yeah, that's pretty much how you should get to figuring out how to craft stuff. And then in an advanced tutorial, I would teach you like the best spots to like farm for certain materials to craft. But overall, just once you're playing it, you'll find things naturally, and then there's other things for research, but that's really not that important. I guess I could just go over it real quick right now. So for example, if you wanted to research something, you take an item that would be in your inventory or bank, and then it says researchable. So then when you research it, it'll show you the item. Now what you do is destroy this item, but you see the reduced cost of sprinting. You will be able to take that and you'll be able to use that in future items for like shoulders, for example. This one is shoulders. You get to use the reduced cost of sprinting for it, so that's pretty good. But we're not going to be doing this because this item is actually pretty solid, actually. But just for future references, it does take quite a bit of time, and it's kind of like those mobile games where you think Clash of Clans or something like that, where you upgrade a building and it takes like, I don't know, X number of days, and you come back and then that's done. You do it again. So that's kind of like how this works. So with that said, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to drop a like on the video and let me know what you thought of it. So I know there weren't any guides previously from me earlier, but I figured with the upcoming Dark Brotherhood expansion, there might be some new players coming in, and this might help you out. So with that said, thanks for watching.